Hey, welcome. I'm the Human Floyd, and this is a follow-up to the second video in my series, The Role-Playing Beginner's Guide to the Elder Scrolls Online. You should probably watch the first two videos before viewing this one if you aren't familiar with role-playing or how to create a roleplay character. I'm going to be using the steps from the previous video to show an example of what creating a roleplay character might look like. For this character, I've decided to go with the Dunmer, or Dark Elves. They have some very extensive lore and are one of my favorite Elder Scrolls races. Even though I played Morrowind quite a bit and consider my knowledge on Dunmer to be pretty good, I'm going to read up on them some more. It never hurts to review lore you've already read. Something new you didn't notice the first time will probably pop up. So here we are on UESP, and I'm searching for Dunmer. There are a lot of results, but the article I'm interested in is called Lore Dunmer. As you can see, it has a few sections of information, as well as a hearty list of links to books and other articles. I read all of the books they have listed, which gave me a lot of ideas for my character. I'm also reading the Dunmer Lore Lexicon written by Ervona on TESO RP, which is an even better collection of information than UESP's article, in my opinion. I decided early on that I wanted to make him a commoner, probably a merchant. I also decided that I wanted him to be a devout follower of the Tribunal. More specifically, I want him to be very interested in and devoted to Vivec, one of the three living gods of the Dunmer. Vivec is a really intriguing character, and I'd like to roleplay one of his worshippers, trying to better understand and emulate him. The third Elder Scrolls game, Morrowind, provided a ton of lore about the teachings of Vivec. One useful book is called Siriani's Sermons. It is an outline of the lifestyle a follower of Vivec is supposed to lead. Then there is a collection of books called the 36 Lessons of Vivec. These are very strange and mysterious writings, which aren't meant to be understood upon first reading them. It's more of a puzzle, one which will take time to figure out. Really more time than I want to spend before creating my character. In fact, I don't think that I understand Vivec well enough to properly roleplay someone who knows a lot about him. So instead of trying to figure it all out right away, I'm going to learn what I can and then gain more knowledge over the course of my roleplay. As my character begins to understand his own religion, I'll better understand the complexities of Vivec as a fictional but complicated character. So this adds a new element to my Dunmer. He is still learning. So I could make him young, or just newly interested in learning about Vivec, or both. The next important question for me to answer is which of the great houses he comes from. The 5 houses of Morrowind are sort of like clans or political parties. I considered that maybe I didn't want my character to belong to any of the houses, just being a simple commoner. But I wasn't sure if that was even possible, so I went to the TESO RP lore discussion board and posted in the lore lexicon for the Dunmer. I asked if Dark Elves who aren't Ashlanders ever choose to belong to no house, and how common or uncommon that might be. I've also recently discovered another good lore community that I didn't mention in my previous video. It's a Facebook page called Elder Scrolls Lore. I asked there if anyone had any information on how prevalent house membership is. Both places gave me the same answer, that the Dark Elves are either an Ashlander or a house elf. It's simply the way their society evolves and is set up. I haven't found a single instance in lore of a Dunmer not belonging to a house, or being an Ashlander, the nomadic tribes living outside of civilization. So now I have to decide which house he will belong to. Once again I turn to UESP, where I open up the article for each of the houses, as well as the in-game books, Great Houses of Morrowind, and The Great Houses and Their Uses. After devouring all of this information and then some, and deliberating on it for like a week, I finally decided to put my character in House Indoril, since they are very devoted followers of the Tribunal. I could have made him House Hlalu, who runs most of Morrowind's economy since he's a merchant, but I decided I liked the idea of a non-Hlalu merchant better, despite how much fun it is to say Hlalu. Before we move on, I want to mention that you might not always find the answers you're looking for during your research. The thing about any fictional lore, be it a video game, novel series, or comic book, is that no developer can create enough lore to answer every question. Sometimes the lore simply doesn't exist for the question you're asking. So in that case, what do you do? Most roleplayers find it completely acceptable and even necessary for us to fill in the gaps with our own ideas. This filling in is what creates the fascinating diversity and individuality of different players and their interpretations of lore. Elder Scrolls lore is almost always written from the perspective of people living in Tamriel. So, like real-life history, it's full of bias, false accounts, and conflicting reports and views. This will both help and hinder you. It helps because it gives you more room to work your own stories and perspectives of lore into your roleplay. It hinders because not everyone's perspective will be the same. What one person says is lore-breaking, another person will disagree and say it's fine. Just read everything you can and feel free to ask the RP community their thoughts. That being said, I'm going to get started on my character sheet so I can post it up and ask for feedback later. My character sheet is pretty simple so far, but I'll flesh it out as we go. I'm not even going to decide his name yet. Instead, I'm going to create his backstory and then decide on a name that would suit him, as well as the rest of the details. The creation of a backstory takes a lot of time, and usually falls together in pieces. Everyone comes up with their backstory differently, so I'm just going to share my thought process as I work on the beginnings of mine. I know my character is a Dunmer and a House Induril merchant, and a follower of Vivec. That's a pretty good start. I think that he would want to live on Vardenfell, the holy island where the city of Vivec and the god himself sit. But since you can't access Vardenfell in ESO, I'll have to have a good reason for him to not be there. I decided that he's a traveling merchant, selling his wares across packed lands, reading his lessons of Vivec, and praying to the tribunal day and night. He hates being a merchant, longing for a life of virtue and faith. But he's not exactly the bravest of mer. Sure, it takes some bravery to travel to some of the places he's willing to sell his wares in, but he isn't quite ready to leap into the fray of battle. He wants to go live at the temple, but feels that he should learn and do some valorous deeds in order to earn his right to study with Vivec. But what else could keep him in this profession besides his lack of bravery? Like real people, an interesting roleplay character can have many reasons for a single decision. While a family to support would be another drive to make gold, the Dunmer value family greatly and, despite their harshness as a race, have a deep love for their closest kin. He must travel and send gold to his wife on Vardenfell. I would say wife and child, but children are very rare in elven societies. And since I'm thinking this character will be relatively young, I don't think he would have kids yet. Working backwards now, I want to ask myself how he met his wife. Was he a merchant before he met her, or did he meet her and then take up the profession in order to provide for their new marriage? It should be noted that males and females in the Elder Scrolls don't quite fall into the stereotypical roles that we often do in human societies. His wife is pretty much just as likely to support him as he is to support her. But since I want to give him a good reason to be sending her money, I could say that she's a gentle soul who gardens and maybe just keeps a couple of netches. Or I could say that she's somehow disabled and unable to work. Another option would be to give her a job of her own, but say that their property or debts require both of them to work. But I decided to say that he doesn't travel because he has to, but because it's his way of trying to live up to Vivec's teachings. Like I said, he feels the need to prove himself, and his way is to explore and hope that some chance at valor will fall upon him. So, his wife is a gentle soul because it gives her a reason to stay on Vardenfell, but she's also a hard-working blacksmith in Vivec. Though I think they're going to live in a small house outside the city in the Ascadian Isles. Okay, so this answers part of my question, but leads me to conclude that he was a merchant before he married his wife. In fact, he met her while he was traveling. He was selling wares in the House Redoran city of Blacklight, because it has a cool name, when he saw a gorgeous young Dunmer gal in the marketplace. He knew he had to get her attention, so he reached into his lockbox and pulled out his most beautiful necklace, made from coral and shells he collected in Vivec's antlers. He waved it at her and shouted a ridiculously low price. She immediately responded and bought the necklace from him. He got her name and asked her out for a drink. I think I'll add more details about her playing hard to get and his struggles to court her later, but that's good enough for now. After that, they moved to Vardenfell together, to be closer to Vivec. My character's devotion to the living god inspired his beloved, who agreed that moving there was the best choice for them. Vardenfell is considered a holy place to the Dunmer, especially the city of Vivec. He lived there for a number of years before realizing there weren't enough buyers for him to hawk his half-decent wares to forever, and he wanted to get back to trying to prove himself. So he went back to traveling and found his way down to the mainland. More details are coming to me as I work it out in my head. Going back to the beginning, I'm thinking his parents were merchants as well. He was born in Mournhold, the capital of Morrowind and the location of the Tribunal Temple. He worked in his family's shop, sweeping, cleaning, moving boxes around, which he hated. He was instilled at a young age with the principles of tribunal worship. His parents were both particularly loyal to Almalexia, but Vivec is a favorite of many Dunmer, and my character found himself understanding why as he learned more about the warrior poet. He took a sword-fighting class to follow in Vivec's warrior ways. His parents didn't disapprove of his love for the god. All of the three were supposed to be loved and honored, but they wished for him to pay more heed to the lady, Almalexia. I'll add many more details over time, but for the purposes of moving this video along, as well as getting into the game for some RP, I'm gonna leave it at that for now. At some point he would have to decide to leave Mournhold and travel to sell whatever wares he could get his hands on. Now that I have a rough idea of the life of my character, I'm going to figure out what his name is. The easiest way for me to do this is to go to UASP and search Dunmer names. I usually just look for a name that I like and then either mix it with another name or come up with a few syllables or letters of my own. This makes it sound like other names of your chosen race without outright stealing them. Although I see nothing wrong with taking a first or last name from an NPC. After all, how many John Smiths are there out in the world? I came up with Sendrin for his first name. For the last name I wanted to take it from one of the names of the family tombs found on Vardenfell. This would give Sendrin another reason to want to live there since his family tomb would be there. But I'm not really sure if there would be restrictions to what families get to put their tombs on Vardenfell, if there are any. It is a holy land after all. So instead I looked up some NPCs from Morrowind the game and stole one of their last names. My character's name is Sendrin Dralno. Now it's time to figure out some of his details and figure out the rest of my character sheet. I already know that he's a merchant, but need to decide how he gets his wares. Since he's not so brave, I don't see him delving into dungeons for them. Instead, I've decided that he buys the items cheap and sells them high. His merchandise isn't often very special, but that's why he keeps moving, so he can always find new customers. His wagon is full of trinkets and clothing, since clothing is light and easy to transport. But he'll collect anything from soul gems to swords, if he has the room for it. Aside from knowing about exchanging goods, he'll have to be a decent salesman. I don't think he's silver-tongued necessarily, but he's pushy enough and convincing enough that he can sell useless crap to people when he needs to. He would have to be pretty knowledgeable about Morrowind since he's traveled so much, so that could be considered a skill, I suppose. I'm gonna say he has good eyes, able to spot things from far away, which benefits him on the road. He can use a sword due to his years of training, but he's no warrior, not like he wishes he was. So what skill does Sendrin Dralno have that stands out? Well, I'm thinking he plays a lute and has an alright singing voice, but I think it would be really interesting to play a character who hasn't discovered his true talent. He doesn't know where his talents lie, which can be discouraging, especially to someone who wants to emulate the Lord, Vivec, the warrior poet. Speaking of poets, Sendrin tries to write poetry, but since I can't write poetry, I don't think he does very well either. In fact, that could serve as a comical aspect to my character. At some point, I'll have to write some awful poetry for him to recite. I usually like to throw in one or two little traits like this, in case comedic relief is ever needed. I already know he's religious, but I want more details than that. So I'm going back to step 1 and doing some research on Vivec and the Tribunal Temple in general. In the book Vivec and Mephala, it is stated that the Dunmer are aware of a darker side to their god. He is a paradox, both light and dark, and while the Tribunal Temple might not outright talk about this shadier side, all who understand the nature of their living God accept that he is representative of darkness as well as light. The book said that most of this understanding is subconscious. I get the impression that most Dunmer probably don't talk about Vivek's aspects of murder, revenge, and secrets. But I've decided that my character, being a devout student and follower of Vivek, will try to follow his lord in every way, including the darker themes. This means he won't be opposed to killing someone, lying, or keeping secrets. In fact, he will try to be a two-sided person in reflection of Vivek, chasing both virtue and vice. I'm starting to feel like Little Sindrin is becoming an interesting, layered character. There are a lot more details I've thought up and figured out, but I think you get the idea. I'll also be adding and changing things as I roleplay. I might choose to retcon part of his story or personality in favor of better ideas. For those that don't know, retcon stands for retroactive continuity. It means to change a part of a story that has already happened. In addition, my character will evolve over time, changing due to the events of roleplay. A real person is always changing in response to things that happen to them, thoughts they have, books they read, and people they meet. A realistic roleplay character will change over time as well. Just something to keep in mind. For example, I don't know if Sindrin will be a merchant forever. Maybe the roleplay I do with him will change him, making him braver, or even altering his beliefs. Who knows, maybe something terrible will happen to him that causes him to have a lapse in faith, or even become a Daedra worshipper. Now that I have a character, the whole world of Tamriel is open to me. But first, I have to create him in the game. Well, I posted my complete character sheet on TESO RP to see what my fellow roleplayers have to say. Just remember that your character belongs only to you, and whatever you want to do with them is fine. But also remember that other people have a right to their own opinion. Not everyone will like your character. That's just part of putting yourself out there. I think getting constructive criticism and other roleplayers' thoughts on my character is very helpful, but not everyone feels that way. So it's totally up to you if you want to post up your character sheet or not. I'm very happy with Sindrin Ralno and really excited to roleplay him. The next video in the series will show an example of a roleplay encounter while explaining the basics of how to engage in roleplay. I've been the Human Floyd. Thanks for watching. Peace.